the network map, and he's like, okay, what's plugged into port 48? And it's like, there's nothing plugged into port 48 according to the schematic. So he goes on the switch and looks, and basically all of the, and this is a core switch for the internet. Okay, this all AT&T, I think it was AT&T traffic was going, and it's been wired. All AT&T traffic going through this switch, which was the main switch out to the internet, all of that traffic was going through port 1. Well, port 1, all data from port 1 was being cloned to port 48. And he's like, well, that's weird. So because that means that if a bit of data goes through port 1, then it'll show up on port 48. You use this for kind of analytics and, you know, trying to figure out how much traffic you're getting and what kind of traffic and whatever. So he's like, well, that's not right. That's not in any of my documentation. What the hell? So he traces the cable, right? And he's following this red cable. And he gets up, and there's this thing called a ladder rack, and basically they're like troughs over your head. And he follows the wire. You can tell this is old because it's all fiber optics now, but he traces this Ethernet cable, and he's walking and walking and walking. He's following it. He comes to a door. And so he unlocks the door, uses mag key, unlocks the door, goes through it, keeps following. Then he hits another door, and his mag key won't work. And he's like, okay, I got to get my manager. So he goes and gets the manager. Don't worry, there's a point to this. He goes and gets the manager, and the manager's like, well, that's odd. That shouldn't be there. This isn't cool. So they go through, and the manager unlocks the door, and they're both following it, right? It's like a snowball. And then they get to another door, and the manager's key won't open it. So he goes to the director. So directors don't usually come down to do this kind of stuff, right? But the director's like, what the hell? So he comes down. So now it's the engineer, the network engineer, the network engineering manager, and the director of network engineering for this facility are now following this red cable. And so the director swipes his mag key, it opens the door, they keep going, right? So eventually they get to the last door, and the director's key opens it, and they watch it, and it goes down into this black box. It goes into a locked black box with vents, and it says property of the U.S. government. And so the guy turns to the director and goes, well, what the hell is this? And the guy and the director says, I don't know what this is. So they call the VP, and the VP doesn't know what it is, right? Nobody has any record of this thing being there. So the VP calls the senior vice president. The senior vice president says, just forget you ever saw it. You all need to leave now. You've reported it. You did a great job. Leave. And they're like, well, no, what is this thing? And he's like, I'm not going to tell you. It's a U.S. government device. Leave. Well, what it actually was like carnivore. And basically what this black box was doing was processing all the internet traffic that went through that exchange point. So the government knew like what all the websites were that you were visiting.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like the mystery of room 226 or something like that.
I wouldn't doubt it because, this he was telling me all this weird stuff, that they have departments, with the DOD and other groups of government officials that monitor what you send out on your email, what you do this, that. They classify you as a risk, not a risk. Then they kind of like, it's not so bad, but like me and you talking right now, because you talk about conspiracies, right? You're probably on a list. Mm-hmm. He's on a list because he's an ex-DOD, and he's definitely, talking about things that he probably shouldn't be talking about. And he's on the list.
Right.
And by me talking to him, he said, undoubtedly, now I'm on the list. And then people talk to me, they get put on this list. And that list is not going to be used unless you get in some type of trouble, And then all of a sudden they can start pulling this stuff out. And, like, oh, you've been having an affair on your wife, or your wife's been having an affair on you. Or whatever they can dig up on you, whatever you incriminated yourself. But let's face it, 90% of the people who, send text messages or emails incriminate themselves on something. You know that. Well,
I mean, it's a very interesting thing. The CIA, right? Actually, in the NSA, but most of the CIA, they actually have a venture funding arm that funds startups, like tech startups, and it's called In-Q-Tel, and everybody knows who they are. And if you look at In-Q-Tel, if you look at who they invest in, you can get a very good idea of where their head's at. And they invest in QTEL. It's all legit. And in QTEL, and it's all very public, InQtel invests in big data. That's taking all this data from buying habits and internet surfing habits and calling habits and email habits, and ingesting it into a huge database. And then they can run queries against the database and tools against the database to create, like maps and create like patterns and all kinds of stuff. Well, InQtel invests heavily in big data companies that are building these high-speed databases to be able to do this analysis and the analytics tools. They also invest in startups that do social mapping. And so that's the kind of thing where, it gets in there and figures out who all your friends in Facebook are, and then it figures out who their friends are and their friends and their friends and their friends. And then it links it up to LinkedIn, and then it searches the internet and finds records of where you posted on a forum or whatever, and it creates a social map where it shows everybody that you're connected to graphically in like a sphere. And so they invest in those too. And so it shows you kind of like where their heads are at as far as, tools that they want to use.
It's so scary because, it's to the point, right? You got your laptop sitting on your dresser at your home, right? You have your laptop turned off, but they could still be monitoring you if you're on a list for some reason. You don't have any privacy anymore.
Well, there's an operating system, right? And it's called FreeBSD, and it's actually fairly secure. And a lot of startups, they use FreeBSD boxes as like VPN servers or firewalls or, stuff like that. It's actually a fairly secure operating system, one of the most secure. And it's all public domain. It's all open source, right? So, people contribute, software engineers in their spare time, they like FreeBSD. They decide that when they hook their camera up to it, it doesn't work so good. So, just to kind of contribute to the greater good, they'll write a new driver for a USB camera, or they'll write some application to record video because they want to record, conversations for their podcasts or whatever. Well, there's a kind of overarching board that oversees some of the core insertions into the software. And apparently every year without fail, somebody with an untraceable IP attempts to slip a backdoor into the kernel which is the core of the operating system. Every year somebody tries to slip a backdoor into the core of the operating system. And every year the review board catches it. But one day they may not. And then they would have a backdoor into the system that could be accessed from, wherever. And these backdoors exist in other places too. So the thing is, though, that like now I think we're, especially after Snowden, we're all very like sensitive to it. Though we all think to ourselves, well, this is fundamentally insecure. My TV's listening to me. My cell phone's taking pictures of me while I'm sleeping. That kind of thing, right? Yeah. But these capabilities have existed for 20 years. They've been able to do things like this for a very long time. It just, with the Internet of Things, all these Internet-enabled devices, Fitbits, phones, they can track you with a Fitbit. There was a big kerfluffle because these guys in the military, they exercise and they have to keep their weight within a certain range based on height to be fit and to stay in the military, right? Well, these guys had Fitbits, and they were jogging around and using their Fitbits to check their pulse or whatever. Well, the Fitbit was broadcasting back to the phone and uploading into the cloud their position. And guess what? They were jogging around the kind of exercise yards in classified bases. So suddenly all these classified bases start appearing all over the place because the guys who are working there are wearing Fitbits.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so suddenly, you're seeing guys jogging at Area 51 or these secret bases, in different countries because they were simply wearing a Fitbit.
So how much more can you get? It's so invasive right now. I mean, people don't realize you don't really have the freedom that you think you have. I mean, back 20 years ago, if you wanted to get information about somebody, to get some mud on somebody, you actually had to spend some money, spend some time, do a lot of physical research to do it. Now you can spend about 20 minutes on the computer and dig up as much mud as you want to spend money for to find out.
Well, I saw a video of a guy. This was a while ago, but I saw a video of a guy, and he was convinced that his wife was cheating on him. So he took a drone. He had a drone, and he took a drone. And when she pulled out, he followed her with the drone, and he actually filmed her from cheating on him from the drone. He had the drone hovering over the car, and he followed her, and he caught her cheating on with the drone.
Oh wow! I don't know if I'd go that far. I don't know that.
Just saying.
But I mean, it's bad. I mean, seriously. I mean, your spending habits, how much money you have, and it makes it so much easier too for these people on the dark web. To get your information. I mean, nothing's secure. Even you go on a government database, even the IRS or any of it. None of your information you type in there or anything is secure. I think the only person that's secure is the president because he won't release it.
Well, or he won't write it down, or he never said it. But I think that the thing about it is that I think this is the time when we need to step back as a society. And, the English, or not the English, but the Europeans have already started to do it, right? And we need to step back as a society and say, you know what, that's great that the corporations can be classified as citizens and all this other stuff. That's really pretty ridiculous, but maybe we need to put some stronger privacy things in place. And I don't see, especially in the current environment, I see a lot of things being removed, but I don't see a lot of privacy statutes being put in place. I see a lot of doors opening for corporations to do whatever they want, but I don't see anybody trying to step up and say, we should have it more randomized so you can't send me letters saying that I'm going to have a baby.
Yeah. That would be shocking to find that out. I'll tell you that. And you know what? I don't care if you're on the right or you're on the left or you're in the middle. That affects everybody. We have to, and maybe that this is controversial or not. I don't know, but we're being distracted. We have to endure, article and treatise after treatise over whether NFL players are standing or kneeling or whatever they're doing. Meanwhile, they're stripping away your privacy rights. And to me, I'm far more concerned about my privacy rights than I am whether somebody is respectfully kneeling at a football game or not. I really don't care. What I care about is the fact that they can spy on me with my own phone. Well, not just that.
That is far more dangerous.
Well, have you been reading the news lately? How can I say it? Where you sent in to check out your family tree, your DNA? Well,
oh yeah, they're logging it. Yeah,
well, not just that. There's one particular company. It gathers the information, right, and then they like if you're in law enforcement, you can actually now pretty much trace somebody down because people, gave their DNA to thinking, well, gee, I want to find out who my ancestries are. How far back it goes, right. And that stuff. Well, you know what? I mean, your privacy, even with your own DNA, which you thought was secure, right? Because you go spend $49.95 to find out who your relatives were. It could be you could be burning one of your relatives down the road. I mean, we've lost almost all our rights, really, and people don't realize it.
And they try to the powers that be, they try to confuse us by making us focus on these trivial events, and meanwhile in the background this is what we do.